Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer here. The Varietal Show is back. I am sitting with my great friend James Hall of Patz Hall Winery. You got it, you guys. Here we are at Patz Hall. It does sound a little bit noisy behind us, but that's because it's harvest. We're just starting it right now, and you know, James and I have had so many great adventures together. I will say that I've been following this brand for a long time. If you guys know Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, you know Patz Hall already. It was founded right here in Sonoma. That's where we're sitting. James, you and Ann Moses and Donald Patz and his wife Heather, two crazy couples that thought they could make it in this business, and here we are today, years, decades later. And what the heck were you guys thinking back then?
Well, we worked together, Donald and I, and we had finished the day, and it was not unusual to hang out in the tasting room and taste a couple of wines together. And of course, like a lot of businesses, you think you see how it's being run. It was a winery called Flora Springs, located in Rutherford, and they had a wine called barrel fermented Chardonnay that was very popular.
Very popular.
In 1983, when I started work for them, there were not very many barrel fermented Chardonnays being made, and certainly not in Napa. And so we got to thinking, like, hey, how would we make wine different? We've got, experience with Burgundy wines. We both traveled, and, we tasted wines from all over the world. And so we had plenty of ideas, pick it earlier and use different oak and try malolactic and do a bunch of stuff like that. And so we spent probably 2 years, jaw-jacking, trying to come up with ways that we would do it if it was ours. And it became kind of a joke. Well, why don't we just start our own winery? Except we had 3 serious problems. 1, we didn't have any vineyards. 2, we didn't have a winery. And 3, we didn't have any money. Other than that, we were all set. Donald was a national sales manager at Flora Springs. He knew a lot of people across the country. I was a Davis-trained winemaker. We were ready to roll. So we started looking at what wine to make, and we quickly eliminated a lot of them because, for financial reasons, as much as anything, because red wine, it takes 2 years of barrel age, and that means you got to be able to afford to make 2 vintages at the very least. And you got to age it in the warehouse. Right. Most cab people would do it for a year. Maybe you get away with 6 or 8 months. But, that was just a ridiculous concept for us. We broke the piggy bank. We scraped together $5,000 each.
That's a lot of money back then, you guys.
Yeah,
if you don't know,
1988.
credit cards weren't as popular as they are today.
Yeah, I mean, you could buy a used car for $3,000. But we realized that the only wine that we could make would be a white wine. And we thought, well, we really like Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling and Gewürztraminer and Chenin Blanc, and but Chardonnay is king, let's face it, or at least queen. And so we saw an opportunity, and we realized that in Napa at the time there were a lot of people making Chardonnay, but it was really at the service of their red wine. There were a lot of phrases like cash flow white and the Chard's good but the cab's great kind of attitude, and we realized obviously in Burgundy great Chardonnay is a thing of beauty, and so we wanted to explore single vineyard bottlings using traditional Burgundy techniques. It doesn't sound particularly revolutionary. I mean, it's been that way.
Back then it was, you guys.
Hundreds of years of Burgundy history, but not so much in California. I mean, Acacia was doing something like that.
That's right.
Kistler, William Sellium,
Saintsbury, another good one.
Chalone.
Ed Meads was kind of starting.
But the notion of native ferment, full malolactic Chardonnay in barrel Surly, bottled unfiltered, was like, are you crazy? But like a lot of young people with crazy ideas, we didn't have anything to lose. We had no money. Ann and I had bought a house that had a $900 a month mortgage payment. And, our philosophy at the time was, well, if we don't lose the house, we win. And so it literally started with 400 cases of wine from a vineyard that was farmed by John Caldwell. He was selling the grapes to Jason Pallmeyer. Pallmeyer was having great success with his red wines, particularly the Merlot, but Chardonnay not so much. And so we bought half the field It was a relatively heavy crop year, and John Caldwell came to us and said, "I got some extra tons," and we said, John, we're not even certain we're going to be able to pay you for what we've already contracted." And he goes, "Don't worry about it. I'll bring you the fruit. Pay me when you've made the wine and sold it." And we're like, "Huh? What kind of deal is that?"
That's a good deal,
so,
you guys.
600 cases is what we started with, which was like our 5-year plan to be at 600 cases, and we're coming out of the blocks, and it was tense. You think, oh, it's only 600 cases. That's 7,200 bottles. That is 7,200 sales you got to make, and that's a lot. But fortunately, back in 1989, when we were selling the wine, distributors, and particularly distributors that handled California wine, new wineries were like exciting news. They would put the wine in the bag, and they'd go to the restaurants and they'd pour it. "I got something new from California," and people were like, "Oh, it's awesome." Nowadays, you get a yawn, and maybe,
Now there's a million new ones, you guys. So, I mean, this was like way before the cutting edge started. This was like I don't want to say primitive times, but I mean, these guys were way ahead of their times. This being a small, a small brand that kind of came out of nowhere. And one thing that you really did mention there, John Caldwell, here we are tasting one of the great producers of Carneros, which is the Hyde Vineyard, Larry Hyde, one of the most famous guys of all Carneros. You really started something big there with these vineyard designates, and this is a very big thing, and that's what we're going to taste is this Hyde Vineyard designate here from the Chardonnay. One of the kings of Chardonnay is Larry Hyde, and amazing family, amazing process there. Right there, we're right here at the winery's right down the street from us, and we're here at the production facility right here in south of downtown Sonoma. But if we were to drive to Napa, just downtown Napa, you're going to pass Larry Hyde's just it's about a mile and a half before you get to Highway 29. It's off to the left, and it's right there, and it's really an amazing piece of land. And you've been getting this sourcing. I mean, obviously that first batch was one thing, but you really started making friends with a lot of people, didn't you?
Well, 1989, I met Larry Hyde. It's kind of a good story. So he had sold grapes to a winery that shall remain nameless because you'll hear later. And I was the winemaker at Honig Cellars, and we made a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, but we also did a lot of custom crushing. And this guy brought in like 15 brand new Francois Frere barrels, and
those are Shishi barrels.
Those are really nice Burgundy barrels, expensive. Even back in the day, they were like deluxe, and they still are. And we pressed out the Hyde Chardonnay, and we put it into these barrels, and it was fermenting, and it was just bloody fantastic. Best white wine in the house. And so one day Larry comes walking up, and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for the owner of the winery." I'm like, "You just missed him. He was here yesterday." And he goes, "Interesting. So he hasn't paid me for the grapes yet." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm thinking to myself, is he going to pay me for the custom crush, right? So like a couple days later, he comes in, and I say, "So Larry Hyde was here looking for you. He says that you owe him money for the fruit." And he's like, "Oh my God, it's been unbelievably terrible. I don't know why I took so much of those Hyde grapes, those barrel. I'm going to have to sell some of it in bulk." And I'm like, "Really? So how much do you think you want a gallon?" He goes, "Well, I don't know, 10, 12 bucks a gallon, something like that." "I'll buy it from you." So I bought our 1989 Chardonnay, which had been Caldwell, now suddenly became essentially 100% Hyde. And the part of the deal was that I was going to pay him $13 a gallon, and he had to use the money I was going to give him to pay Larry Hyde. And I called Larry, and he said, "So I've talked to this guy, and I'm buying the wine from him. I'm giving him the check on Friday, and he promised he was going to use the money to pay you." So next week, I gave the guy the money. He paid Larry Hyde, and I have this beautiful Hyde Vineyards wine.
And here we are, still in good condition with Larry. Larry still loves you.
And so
loves us for selling it to him.
1990, the guy that had the contract is like, "I can't take all those grapes." So I signed a contract for half of his block, and that was really the first contract that I had with Larry Hyde. And the 1990 was our third vintage, a very important year. We were basically bankrupt.
Yeah.
The 89 year in Napa was super tough. A very intense rainstorm came in the third week of September. I remember the Merlot crop was literally just melting off vines. It was panic. And the resulting Napa Reds were pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
All the critics jumped on them with both feet. And we went out trying to sell, our 89, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, we're not buying any 89s. It's a disaster, blah, blah, blah. So we sold half of it, and we didn't have enough money to make the 90, which was a legendary wine.
Yes.
One of the greatest Chardonnays I've ever made. And we had this conundrum, like, we got to pick the very best barrels. We were going to have to cherry pick this. Yeah. This is it. We got one bullet left in the gun. If the 90 doesn't hit, we're done.
Yep.
And a guy named Robert Parker, who had been reviewing Napa Chardonnays very aggressively, his last review, introduction to the 89s, was, how disappointed he was with Napa Chardonnay, and nobody was taking it seriously, and it resembled industrial swill. He used that phrase. So somebody got really mad at him and sent him like a fax. Tells you how old it is, right? Yeah. And it was something to the effect: if you ever set your foot in Napa, you're gonna be in big trouble. Well, he canceled his trip to Napa, and our distributor in Maryland, where Robert Parker lived, they would hang out and watch college basketball. Yeah. So the distributor pulls out a bottle of Patz Hall 90. They drink it at watching this basketball game. Parker loves it. Puts a review on the back issue of the Wine Advocate, and our New York distributor had a little deal going with the printer where he paid this guy to deliver him an issue of the Advocate the day it was printed. They looked at the review, they realized they had our wine in their portfolio, they bought the entire vintage in 4 hours.
Boom!
Yep, all 400 cases. I still remember opening the post office box and getting that check out. That was a very special day.
That's a very special day. One of the special days of your life.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's the only reason we're still here, is because that happened.
Wow.
And so it was all bootstrapped. We made one vintage, sold it, could pay the next vintage, sold it. And it was a crazy sort of Rube Goldberg self-perpetuating Chardonnay machine. And it went on that way till 2005. When we hired our first employee.
That's amazing. Here we are. This is just an amazing experience. I mean, I got to put a little bit more in my glass just because it's so delicious. Such great acidity. This year is the anniversary of this appellation. It's actually the 40-year anniversary of the Carneros appellation, and we're going to go more into that too. I keep putting the wrong one in. I thought
you're drawn to Pinot.
I'm drawn to Pinot, you guys.
Can't resist it.
But this one is the 40-year anniversary of the Carneros appellation, but it's also the 40-year anniversary of the Russian River appellation. We're going to go into that in a second, but let's stay here for a second. Chardonnay and Carneros, it's a match made in heaven. And to be really honest, in my opinion, Larry Hyde has been one of the greatest promoters of it because he grows great grapes. You got to have great grapes to make great wines.
Particularly Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And Pinot. But every variety, it's about the vineyard. You blend a bunch of vineyards together, maybe you kind of, don't see that as clearly, but, with our model of focusing on vineyard designates, you can't have a vineyard that's too good. Right. And so not owning the vineyards, which was a little hard, or still is a little hard for some of my European friends to figure out, is really the secret, because we were able to make relationships. We still are making new relationships with people that have really good vineyard sites, but they're professional grape growers. They're not winemakers. Yeah. And we don't want just the entire field. We want the tenderloin. We want the 6 rows down the middle with the right clone on the right aspect with the right soil grown by the right guy. And so, now there's 22 wines in our portfolio, which is kind of ridiculous.
But you know what? They all taste good, you guys, and that's the most important thing.
They taste different.
They all taste different. Yeah. I love this. I mean, it's got the classic lemon note to it. It's like a pear frangipane. The kind of little crispy crust on the outside is just opened up on the backside of it now. There's the apple, there's the pear, there's And there's that citrusy note to it.
Minerality.
And the
you know.
minerality. And it's
You hear
from that
a lot.
vineyard.
You hear a lot about minerality, particularly in European whites. But this wine has that sort of steely acid that's mouth-watering. It's texture and rich, but at the same time, it's really dry and cleansing.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not that I'm doing in the winery. My winemaking is very primitive. You know, it's right out of medieval Burgundy. You know, we use electricity, but you know, we don't do much else.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just pretty pure here.
Yeah.
It's a great thing for sure.
And
That's why I
it's
like
a fast
these wines.
pack.
Yeah.
You know, all these vineyard designates that we make. You know, if we're trying out a new vineyard, you know, it's got to make the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we're not putting it in our bottle just because it has a cool vineyard name. It's got to slot in and hold its own. And that's been maybe the most rewarding part about the whole adventure, is meeting and working with some of the best grape growers in the world. Often they're older, multi-generational Sonoma families, the Martinellis, the Chenoweths, the Dutton family. And we've gotten to the point where, you know, they're selling me their best grapes, and I pay top dollar for top grapes, and I'm particular about how they're grown.
Yes, you are.
And it ends up being this great win-win situation for both of us.
Yep.
And I can tell you, making wine is a lot easier when you have killer grapes.
Yes, it is. Speaking of killer grapes, we got the Jenkins Ranch right here. So this is a vineyard designate from the Jenkins Ranch. I will say one thing. I just had a bottle of Jenkins recently. This is Russian River Valley again, you guys. And so this is a really, well, this is Sonoma Coast, actually, sorry. This one is technically Sonoma Coast.
It is in Russian River, though.
But it is Russian River. You can technically call it either in this zone.
Well, it wasn't in Russian River when we started making
Right.
it. And then they made Russian River bigger, and we decided to keep it Sonoma Coast.
Yeah. And Sonoma Coast, you've helped really do a lot with that appellation too.
I'm a booster. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very large appellation, but there's differences in the neighborhoods. There's differences in the region, and it's a very good way to telegraph to the consumer the style and kind of wine they're going to have. And the diversity is our strength. You know, it's not the same as a European system where we're looking, you know, at soil types and very, very specific viticultural boundaries. It's really a geopolitical marketing. So there's a lot of,
And
it's a big tent. It's
the
a big
bigger
tent.
thing is we're still young here. We don't even know our greatest potential in the future. I mean, Burgundy has a lot on us as far as that's concerned. But what we've done so far in Sonoma County has been really amazing. So here we go into this. I will say one thing. I just did a cruise into Alaska, and I took a bottle. I had one slot. I had 99. I could fit 99 bottles into these boxes. Believe it or not, on a ship, 99 bottles. And I had 98, and I threw in a bottle, an old.
2007.
I think it was 2007 Jenkins.
Yeah.
And I had it with like kind of a surf and turf on the boat. And I took some people from Philadelphia to that dinner with me.
No.
It was really great, you guys. And you know, just recently, I want to say this about James and Ann. They were both acknowledged this last, just this past spring, or sorry, well, in
2
the
weeks
spring.
ago.
Sorry, I'm thinking about the first auction that we did this year. But there's two sets of these auctions. One's really an auction where you're auctioning off barrels, and the other one is where you're auctioning off bottles, and you're raising money for charity. And this one, James and Ann and Patz Hall brand were really acknowledged. You got a special award, didn't you?
We were honorary chairs, which is, I mean, a tremendous honor. I'm very humbled by that. A chance to represent Sonoma County, and I delivered a speech that I had a hard time like getting through without choking up. It's a very emotional subject for me, the relationships that we have here in Sonoma, and the amount of goodwill that Sonoma County creates through its wines. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in karma to a certain degree, and every bottle of wine is a potential beautiful relationship. Sharing a bottle of wine builds connections between people. I mean, from weddings to dates to, you know, Wednesday dinner with the spouse. It's a way to bring people together and create empathy and caring. And I was incredibly humbled to be honored as a leader in that, and I'm still kind of all goosey about the ramifications of it.
Yeah, and you had our great politicians that were there awarding you. As this amazing thing, and I really was super proud of you. I got to sit with him and Ann at the table, so I made sure they had bubbles the minute they sat down, and we really had we certainly had an amazing lunch together, and a great time helping raise money for charity here in Sonoma County.
1.3 mil.
Yeah, 1.3 mil, and I'll just say this: that's Sonoma County Vintners Foundation. They are the best people. What we do and what we give back to this community is a big deal. And just to have you be a very important person that helped do it this year, that was really special.
I was very honored and nervous as hell about giving that speech.
Yeah, that's why I made sure you had good wine at all times, you guys. That was my job. Here we go into this amazing Jenkins. I mean, definitely deep, broad. I love the dark fruit kind of characteristics of this. It's got that wildness to it too. I mean,
it's Sebastopol Hills.
It's Sebastopol Hills, you guys. Sebastopol Hills is wild. It deserves to be its own appellation. I feel that someday it will be Sebastopol Hills. We'll see. It's right on the cusp of Petaluma Gap and Russian River and Green Valley. Actually, it's right in between all of them. And it's kind of in a shaky zone there, but it does get a lot of the wind from the Petaluma Gap. And so it does have time to ripen. I mean, it's got plenty of time. It's not hot, but it's not cold.
It's one of the last vineyards we picked.
It's warm. And these are, I mean, it just tastes like the site. And that's what going back to what James said, he really is not a guy that's doing a bunch of stuff in the back, all this hocus pocus stuff. Just wants the site to really come through in the glass. And I think this is a really good example of that.
Yeah. It's proven itself over the years. This is a vineyard that was planted by Charlie Chenoweth, one of the legends in West Coast Pinot Noir.
We love that guy.
His family moved to Sonoma in 1847, and he learned about growing grapes from the Duttons. He worked with the Dutton family, and he went out on his own, and obviously, with those sort of family roots, he had a lot of connections to West County farmers, and converted a lot of apple orchards, mostly to Pinot Noir, and I buy 5 different vineyards that Charlie farms for us, and they're the best wines in the house with a couple of exceptions. And so Charlie's the man, and the Jenkins family, 3rd generation, they homesteaded this property, and it used to be an apple orchard, Gravenstein's, and now it's Pinot Noir. So Costa Brown gets some, Jamie Whetstone, my ex-partner Donald Patz buys some, I buy some. So
I love it.
It's a very well-established vineyard, and it's sneaky because Jenkins is kind of like, what is that? It sounds familiar, right?
But it's true. It's really just a handful of wineries that do it. You're the ones that taught me about it. I didn't know Jenkins until I tasted yours.
We bought the grapes in 2005. So the first grapes produced, we made a wine out of it.
So the second one we're going to taste here, this is the Little Boot Vineyard, and this is Russian River Valley. This is only 12 barrels produced. So just a couple hundred cases. What are we talking about here? What's so different about this one versus the other one?
Well, this is on Occidental Road, and the corner of Occidental and Honeve Road, which is on the last ridge of Occidental Road before it drops down into the town of Occidental. So it's set back from the Sonoma coast far enough that it's not as windy and foggy, but it's still very cool. It's got the classic Russian River Gold Ridge Series sandy loam soils. It's planted by Charlie Chenoweth. I helped select the clones. I helped develop the vineyard financially, and it's one of my favorites. It's more bright red fruit, a leaner palate, more acidic, less broad texture than the Sebastopol Hills. A little nervy, even, kind of touch nervous.
Yeah, and it's got great high acid too, so it's going to age for a while. I mean, like if it's just showy up front and that's all you're getting, that's not really. It doesn't have much stability as far as going the long distance. I think that acidity and your nervousness there, as you said, it's dancing around your mouth. It's still a youthful one that's just like bouncing all around your mouth, and someday it will settle down a little bit more. But right now, I could pair it with a lot of different foods.
This is, you know, the drinking window's open.
Yeah.
But, you know, these wines will, particularly if it's in a good cellar, you know, they'll age 8, 10, 12 years, no problem.
Yeah.
But this is 4 different selections of Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of a selection Marsal blend.
Yeah.
And, you know, what can I say? It's just another
just
killer
delicious.
vineyard site in Western Sonoma. Just another one.
Just another one. Yeah, we've got a few we talk about. I know it'd be so easy to come out here with you and 28 different bottlings per year and these kinds of things, but we don't have enough time, you guys. You can find out more at patzandhall.com. I want to thank you so much, James. I'm always so proud of you. I'm always just a dear friend of mine, and watching this man achieve so much and being a good friend, drinking off record too with him. You know, fine bubblies and all the things that we do.
Oh,
and
your champagne tasting. Oh my God,
I
I circle that date on the calendar.
But, you know, I get to reward him back, but he rewards us by making these great wines. It's a great brand, Patz Hall. You know Chardonnay, you know Pinot Noir, you know Patz Hall. Enjoy, you guys, and thank you, James, once again.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Chris. Thanks
The Varietal Show will be back. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Ciao.